Welcome to this edition of Ethical Sustainable Investment News and Analysis to Profit By. I'm Ron Robbins, an ethical investing pioneer for over 40 years, quoted in the Wall Street Journal, MarketWatch, the Globe and Mail, and numerous other media, and founder of the highly respected global ethical sustainable investing information website, Investing for the Soul. And please listen to my disclaimer statement at the end of this podcast. Now enjoy this podcast. Hello, Ron Robbins here. Welcome to podcast episode 23 for January 17th, 2020, titled ESG Funds, Stocks for 2020 and More, presented by Investing for the Soul. Investingforthesoul.com is your site for vital global ethical and sustainable investing news, commentary, information, and resources. Remember that you can find a full transcript, links to content including stock symbols, and bonus material at this episode's podcast page located at investingforthesoul.com/podcasts. And Google any terms that are unfamiliar to you. Now to this podcast. Let's begin with a wrap-up of 2019 from Morningstar's distinguished sustainability analyst John Hale. His article is titled 10 Sustainable Investing Stories of 2019. His 10 top stories are the growing immediacy of climate change, the shift towards stakeholder capitalism, proxy voting and shareholder engagement take center stage, turning back the clock at the SEC, interest in sustainable investing continues to rise among individual investors, flows into U.S. sustainable funds more than tripled in 2019, a strong year for U.S. sustainable fund performance, many more funds considering ESG, enhancement to Morningstar sustainability rating, and impact investing. It's well worth reading, so go to the link on this episode's web page. Another article with a Morningstar connection is by Nancy Zamble, titled Social Responsibility, 5 Top-Rated ESG Funds. It's published on the Money Show site. Ms. Zamble looked at about 25 of the most popular SRI funds on Morningstar, searching for the highest rated. Here are the 5 ESG funds she recommends. First one is Allianz GI Global Water Fund Class A, Green Century Balanced Fund, iShares MSCI KLD 400 Social ETF, the Parnassus Core Equity Fund Investor Shares, and the Calvert Global Water Fund Class A. On a different note, has the new trade deal between the US and China sparked your interest in Chinese tech companies? Or do you already invest in them? Either way, you'll be interested in a new report released by Greenpeace concerning their sustainability performance. You can read all about it in a Fortune article by Naomi Xu, Elegant, titled They Must Scale Up. Greenpeace ranks China's tech giants on renewable energy. Ms. Xu Elegant writes that Greenpeace collaborated with the North China Electric Power University for the report, which analyzed 15 of China's biggest cloud companies and data center operators and scored them based on their performance in renewable energy, carbon reduction, and energy efficiency. End quote. Further, she writes that the e-commerce giant Alibaba, China's largest company by market value, scored 60 out of a possible 100 points on the ranking. Tencent, China's second largest publicly listed company, scored 52 on the report. Huawei and Baidu each scored 46, while e-commerce company JD.com received just 12 points. Huawei was the only company on the list that has set a greenhouse gas emission reduction target. Software firm Biosite Software, whose parent company is the state-owned Fortune Global 500 company Baiwu Steel, made the bottom of the ranking, receiving just 2 points." End quote. Incidentally, I have the link to the full report on this episode's page at the investingforthesoul.com podcasts. Now back to the crucial renewable energy space, where there have been several recent articles reviewing and recommending the best ESG funds stocks in the sector. The first article I want to discuss is titled, "These were the 5 best renewable energy stocks of 2019. It's by Scott Levine, writing on the Motley Fool site. He says the 5 leaders were Brookfield Renewable Partners, up 81%, Plug Power, up 149%, Solar Edge Technologies, up 169%, Ballard Power, up 190%, and Enphase Energy, up 466%. As for 2020, Mr. Levine says that, I quote, "In general, fuel cell companies, Plug Power and Ballard Power, seem the most likely to hit bumps in the road in 2020, while Brookfield Renewable Partners, Solar Edge, and Enphase appear poised to build on their recent successes." End quote. The second article is titled, "4 Top Solar Energy Stocks to Buy in January," by a regular on this podcast, Travis Hoyum. He says to buy, again, Brookfield Renewable Partners. Yes, this stock really has a huge following. Even more about it later in this podcast. He says Brookfield, quote, "returned 350% over the decade when you include dividends," end quote. His second pick is another popular recommendation, SunPower. About SunPower, he writes, "What I like about SunPower's new strategy is that it will be a large platform company in distributed solar. SunPower is also the #1 commercial solar developer in the US, a huge market that's been underexploited thus far." End quote. Mr. Levine's third choice is Vivant Solar. About Vivant, he says, quote, "The #2 residential solar installer in the US is Vivant Solar, and unlike SunPower, it's the company installing solar panels on customers' roofs." End quote. Fourthly is First Solar. Quote, "No company has been as successful in this industry as First Solar. It produces thin film solar panels that are primarily used in utility-scale solar projects." End quote. The third article, 2 Top Renewable Energy Stocks to Buy in January, is by Neha Shamaria, also a Motley Fool contributor. Her picks are also familiar to this podcast listeners. The first one is Next Era Energy. She writes that, "Today, Next Era is the world's largest producer of wind and solar energy, thanks to its decisions to invest in them long before most other traditional utilities took the plunge." End quote. Of her second choice, Brookfield Renewable Partners, she comments that Brookfield Renewable Partners is the perfect bet on hydroelectric power. Hydropower, not solar or wind, is currently the world's largest renewable source of electricity generation. End quote. Incidentally, Brookfield Renewable Partners is involved in a major takeover of Terraform Power. Terraform Power has solar and wind assets in the US and Europe. Read all about it in an article titled "Brookfield Powers Ahead with Takeover Bid for Terraform" by Abigail Townsend on the Sharecast site. The fourth and final renewable energy-related article I want to cover is titled "Better Buy, Brookfield Infrastructure Partners versus Brookfield asset management. It's by John Bromos, another analyst I often feature. He states that, quote, Brookfield Asset Management is the parent of Brookfield Infrastructure Partners, end quote. In summation, he writes that, with its superior yield, excellent management team, and more recession-resistant portfolio, Brookfield Infrastructure Partners is going to be the better buy for most investors. However, those who are looking for an investment for a tax-advantaged account may not be able to invest. For these investors, Brookfield Asset Management is certainly an attractive option, as long as it's not a high dividend yield you're after. End quote. More on the subject of clean energy ESG funds stocks are 10 clean energy stocks for 2020 by Tom Conrad, writing for the Aut Energy site. Many of his picks haven't been covered in this podcast before. Mr. Conrad has a great record of stock picking. He says, quoting him, that I've been publishing lists of 10 clean energy stocks that I think will do well in the year to come since 2008. With a 46% total return, the 2019 list has had its best year since 2009, when it managed a 57% return by catching the rebound off the 2008 crash. End quote. So he's worth paying attention to. I urge you to go to his article for his reasoning behind each choice. The link is on this podcast episode's webpage. Forgive me if I don't pronounce all their names correctly, so here are his picks. Covanta Holding Corp. and Valeo SA, Green Plains Partners, NFI Group, MIX Telematics, Compagnia Energetica de Minas Gerais, aka CEMEG, Red Electrica Corporation, SA, Voila Environment SA, Polaris Infrastructure Inc., and Pattern Energy Group. Finally, a heads up on what could be a game changer in the rechargeable battery field. It has the potential to significantly impact your renewable energy related investments. Read all about it in No More Heavy Metals. New IBM battery chemistry research could address mineral sourcing concerns. It's by Heather Clancy at the Greenpeace site. Quoting Ms. Clancy, she says that IBM scientists in the battery laboratory say they have created multiple prototypes of a battery that uses a cathode free of both cobalt and nickel. End quote. This could be big. Well, these are my top news stories and tips for ethical and sustainable investors over the past 2 weeks. Again, to get all the links, stock symbols and more, or to read the transcript of this podcast and with additional information too, please go to investingforthesoul.com/podcasts and scroll down to this episode. And be sure to click the like and subscribe buttons in iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you download or listen to this podcast. Also, please click the share buttons to share this podcast with your friends and family. That way, you can help promote not only this podcast, but ethical and sustainable investing globally. So let's help create a better world with our investments. Contact me if you have any questions. Thank you for listening. Talk to you again on January 31st. Learn how to create a simple portfolio reflecting your personal values by taking my 1-hour tutorial. Go to investingforthesoul.com/podcasts and click the link in the right-hand column for my DIY Ethical Sustainable Investing Pays tutorial. Now, I'll mention in the podcast if I have any direct interest or holdings in companies or securities I'm talking about. Furthermore, any news, opinions, analysis, or other information offered by myself, as well as references and information to or from other external sources in this podcast, is provided as general market information and should not be relied upon and thus does not constitute investment advice. Investors should consult their own licensed investment professional before making investments. Also, I will not accept liability for any loss or damage, including without limitation any loss of profit, which may arise directly or indirectly from use of or reliance on information in this podcast. Do contact me at ronr@investingforthesoul.com. Signing off, this is Ron Robbins. Bye for now.